The low hum above my ceiling wasn't just annoying, it was suspiciously rhythmic, like a metronome set by someone who had no concept of peace. At first, I chalked it up to a dying AC unit or maybe a family of squirrels in the attic. But then, during a secure Zoom call with a government server on the other end, my signal dropped for precisely 6 seconds. That might not mean much to the average person, but in my world, 6 seconds of interference could cost lives. I calmly muted the call, stood up, and made my way to the attic ladder. What I found almost made me laugh, not because it was funny, but because the audacity of it all was cartoonish. There, drilled right into the support beam of my federal cyber monitoring post disguised as a quiet suburban home, was a blinking Wi-Fi relay box stamped with a tacky sticker from the local homeowners association. A cable ran from it out the window, across the shingles, and down into a repeater bolted directly onto my chimney. I hadn't given permission. I hadn't even been notified. Someone had installed unauthorized broadcast hardware on top of a national security agency digital dead zone. Whoever did this had just picked the worst possible roof in America. And I don't mean worst in a legal sense. I mean worst in the classified, eyes-only, top clearance kind of way. I climbed down, shut the attic hatch, and sat in the silence of my living room. My cat looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Or maybe after 5 years of maintaining cover as a mild-mannered IT consultant named Kyle Mercer in this HOA-ridden neighborhood, the time had finally come for my cover to be tested. I walked to the antique liquor cabinet, the one my neighbors assumed held scotch or cigars. Inside was my real job, a secure laptop, biometric lock, a hardened satellite uplink disguised as a vintage record player, and a surveillance grid capable of scanning a 400-meter radius. As soon as I reconnected the system, red pings lit up across my screen. Their little tower project wasn't just bouncing internet, it was sniffing metadata, tagging frequencies, and potentially mirroring devices. I stayed calm, amused even. Someone had told the HOA board that installing a Wi-Fi booster would help the community. They'd gotten it approved, climbed onto my roof without a single knock, and bolted a commercial-grade surveillance antenna into the heart of a classified government installation. I didn't go nuclear, not immediately. Years of intelligence work had taught me the value of patience. Let the enemy expose themselves. So I called the HOA president. Her name was Debbie Sterling. Of course it was. She ran the neighborhood like a cruise director with delusions of grandeur. I politely asked if there had been any recent technology upgrades. Debbie replied with a theatrical sigh. "Oh yes. We finally got that tower up. Isn't it great? We used your house because it has the clearest line of sight and you weren't using your roof anyway." I let her words hang. She continued babbling about boosted speeds and how it would make virtual meetings more seamless. I asked if she had received permission to install anything on my home. She said, and I quote, "We assumed you wouldn't mind. You're just the IT guy, right?" I ended the call before I said something that would have landed me in federal custody. I stared at my screen and thought about the years I'd put into this cover, attending potlucks, waving at dog walkers, feigning interest in recycling debates. All of it blown apart by a bunch of clueless suburban busybodies who decided my house was the best place to bolt their vanity project. That night, I climbed the roof with a red-taped flashlight and inspected the setup. Whoever installed this knew their stuff. It wasn't just a booster. It was collecting data, possibly browser history. I traced the cable to the Sauersee repeater hidden behind latticework near the HOA clubhouse. More than that, it was inbound. Someone had remotely accessed it within the last hour. I returned home and set up a digital honeypot files and folders that screamed classified. One was labeled NSA_internal_backup_2020. I buried it deep and loaded it with scrambled Wikipedia articles disguised with fake encryption. Classic bait. Then I reconnected their cable to my sandbox server and activated the trap. By sunrise, I had a hit. An HOA laptop accessed the decoy and attempted to open 2 PDFs. They even clicked the do_not_open.exe, buried at the bottom. I tracked it to a generic laptop tagged as HOA Tadman1. The user had just committed what could be classified as a federal offense if they weren't too ignorant to know it. From that moment on, every keystroke they made was mirrored to my terminal. I leaned back and watched in real time as they opened a spreadsheet titled Resident Overuse Report. Names, data caps, browser logs. They weren't just boosting Wi-Fi, they were monetizing it. The HOA was billing residents based on what they streamed. They wanted to play with data? I'd show them how data bites back. Next, I baited the honeypot with a new file, NSA_satellite_zones_L4_clearance.pdf. Inside was an encrypted trigger that, when opened, would ping federal monitors with the access point's GPS, IP, and user hash. Sure enough, it got opened. The user, DS Sterling and her laptop. Debbie had joined the game. I sent an anonymous email to the HOA board, unauthorized surveillance detected. Legal risk. Recommend immediate shutdown. Attached was a fake but convincing Federal Communications Review Board memo. Within hours, I saw Debbie pacing the sidewalk, phone glued to her ear. A tech guy named Marcus showed up, visibly nervous, lugging a backpack full of tools. They approached my house. I watched from my cams as he opened the tower base and fiddled with the hardware. I heard Debbie muttering, "We have to fix this before anyone else finds out." She knocked. I opened. "Hi, Kyle," she chirped. "Just doing a firmware update." I nodded. "Hope the signal's not bouncing off anything sensitive," I said. She laughed nervously and babbled about shared elevation rights. I smiled and closed the door. Back at my terminal, I watched Marcus attempt to erase logs. I mirrored every deletion in real time. Nice and tidy. That night, someone accessed the NSA file again. The flag triggered. My secure line blinked green. The agency was now watching. The next morning, I watered my lawn as two black SUVs rolled up. Agents stepped out calm and unassuming. They entered the HOA office and emerged 30 minutes later. Debbie looked like a woman who'd seen a ghost. Her phone barely left her hand the rest of the day. By noon, they were collecting laptops. One board member tried to protest. It didn't help. Debbie's HOA kingdom had become the most heavily monitored suburban square footage in the state. Later that day, she showed up at my door with a lawyer. They claimed it was all a misunderstanding. I didn't argue. I asked Debbie if she'd accessed NSA_internal_backup_2020. She froze. I showed her the logs, timestamps, screenshots. She left without a word. That evening, I finalized my report. The agents had cloned the tower drives. Every shred of evidence, Debbie's emails, Marcus login attempts, spoofed tech fees, was secured and archived. By midnight, Debbie's laptop pinged the honeypot one final time during an autosync. Too late. Her digital footprint was sealed. The following morning, agents returned with a warrant. They took her devices. There were no arrests, no media. Just quiet dismantling. Precision. That afternoon, her name vanished from the HOA site. The board appointed Mrs. Gloria Carmichael, a retired librarian, as interim president. She immediately promised transparency. Residents reviewed fine records and realized they'd been scam billed for non-existent bandwidth overages. Lawsuits followed. The local news caught wind. Debbie became a ghost. But justice doesn't always come with sirens. Sometimes it arrives in silent vans and metadata packets. As I dismantled my temporary rig, deleted the honeypot, and scrubbed my local network, I took one last stroll around the block. The HOA president's plaque was gone from Debbie's lawn. A patch of fresh dirt sat in its place. My cat was already curled in his travel crate when I loaded the car. As I drove away, a few neighbors waved. One watched from a window. Debbie. She wasn't feared now. Just another person trapped in the wreckage she'd created. Her chapter in the agency logs was closed. Operation complete. No headlines. No names. Just one quiet line, HOA_Sterling_incident_complete.